I want to emphasize that the Asia-Pacific region is absolutely critical to America's economic growth. We consider it a top priority. When I meet with world leaders, what's striking, whether it's in Europe or here in Asia?
Well, our leader of the free world, Obama, thinks that Hawaii's in Asia. Now everyone's attacking Kane for making some flubs, but of course they let him get away with it because the government media complex is owned. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democrat National Committee, as you well know, which is why they would hire Hillary Clinton to put her on NBC and say that she'll be neutral. She was as neutral. She will be as neutral as Tim Russert was, which is not saying very much. So as Mr. and Mrs. Lord of the Fries is in Hawaii, are in Hawaii, and Mr. Herman Cain doesn't know where Libya is, and Romney doesn't know where this is, and Obama doesn't know where that is. This is what's going on in the world. Nancy Pelosi says that 60 Minutes, CBS, is now a right-wing hit group because they dared expose her in the Visa insider trading scam. She has now declared CBS a member of the vast right-wing conspiracy. All I can say is to CBS reporters, if you may be listening to the Savage Nation, as I know many of you are, in New York especially on WR, welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the right-wing conspiracy. You have now been made an honorary member by Nancy Pelosi. At the same time, we've got radical communists in the streets of America under the guise of, I don't know what they claim they are, but the Occupy groups are nakedly communist street mobs. At this time, they are not violent. They will become violent. They always do. The fact of the matter is they were funded by George Soros and the Tides Foundation. There is a trail of money running right back into the Tides Foundation in the organizing and Soros in the seed funding for this insanity. Now, you may say, well, wait a minute, Mike. I agree with a lot of what you say. You can analyze things pretty clearly, but why would a multi-billionaire like George Soros want communism to rise in the West? It doesn't make sense. Well, here's what you don't understand. Notice who the targets are of the Occupy groups. It's bankers. It's Goldman Sachs. It's Jamie Dimon and others. They never mention George Soros. The banks are the targets of the vermin in the street, the useful idiots, when it's the hedge funds, actually, who destroyed America's economy. It wasn't really the banks. It was the hedge funds that did it. It was the hedge funds that did it. It was the Managed Funds Association that did it, not the banks. And that's why a guy like Soros would throw them off, because he's that smart. He didn't become a billionaire by being stupid. He knows how to take people and deflect them from the true targets of their wrath. Now, what do these vermin in the gutters actually want? You don't understand how dangerous this is. But I've been a student of anti-communism my entire life because my grandfather fled communism in Russia. He fled the Bolsheviks. He knows what Bolshevism brought to Russia. I know what Bolshevism brought to Russia. I know what Pol Pot brought to Cambodia. I know what the North Vietnamese did to the 1 million people they slaughtered in South Vietnam after the radical vermin left. The intergenerational scum that's in the streets are basically their descendants. They killed 1 million people in South Vietnam after the communist hordes took over South Vietnam. So what do these rats want? Here it is. I didn't make any of this up. One, they want to repeal the Taft-Hartley Act. They want all workers in America unionized. That means every worker in America should be a member of a union. That's why the unions are supporting them. That is why the unions have funded them. That is why the unions are on their side. Raise the minimum wage immediately to $18 an hour. Now, if you are a small business, could you afford an $18 an hour minimum wage? They want to institute a 6-hour workday and 6 weeks of paid vacation. Now, the people who have that are in Greece and Italy. As you well know, their economies have collapsed. We could not afford a 6-hour workday and 6 weeks of paid vacation. But the fools in the streets don't understand that a business must sustain itself through profit. If it has no profit, it can't sustain itself. Okay, shall I go on? Repeal English-only laws. They call them racist and xenophobic. They're now turning on the American citizen who speaks English and calling you a racist and xenophobic if you speak English. Next, they want open all the borders to all immigrants, legal or illegal. Offer immediate unconditional amnesty to all undocumented illegal aliens in the United States. Would you like that? Would you like all illegal aliens made into citizens? They do. Create a single-payer universal health care system. Tax the very rich at rates up to 90%. Allow workers to elect their supervisors. Lower the retirement age to 55. Create a 5% annual wealth tax for the very rich. Wait, here's the best. Are you ready for this? The vermin in the gutters, the tent sleepers, the sex addicts, the drug addicts say, and it's in writing, ban the private ownership of land. I've never seen anything like this since the communist revolution of 1917. Ban the private ownership of land. Do you understand that your sympathies are wrong if you're on their side? Next, make homeschooling illegal. Religious fanatics use it to feed their children propaganda. This is the very opposite of the reality. Homeschooling is used by people who don't want their children brainwashed by the public schools. Abolish the death penalty, they say, and abolish life in prison. We call for the immediate release of all death row inmates from death row. Release all political prisoners immediately. There are none. There are no political prisoners in America. Abolish the debt limit. Ban private gun ownership. Did you hear that? Did that put a chill up your spine? Immediate debt forgiveness for all. All debt should be wiped out in America. And end the war on drugs. Now, I would say to you that if I try to analyze some of this, it would make no sense. What they're saying is get rid of the Constitution and implement totalitarian communism. Do you understand what you're dealing with here? Do you have any idea that we're dealing with a communist revolution in America ever since Obama was engineered into the White House, and that this is part and parcel of his election, his re-election campaign? Why do you think the Lord of the Fries is in Hawaii right now? Why do you think Mrs. Lord of the Fries is in Hawaii right now saying let them eat steak and arugula? I'll eat steak, I'll eat fries, but you should eat arugula. I could ask you to call a show, but there's nothing that you could say that is worth saying, that I haven't said. I mean, I'm not knocking you. The man says here in Asia while speaking at a press conference in Hawaii. Unto itself, it's nothing. It's a slip of the tongue. But since everything Herman Cain says is scrutinized and criticized, you'd think some of the geniuses at the midstream media would say the president made a gaffe. They won't say it. They will not ever point out the fact that not only does the king have no clothes, the king has no brain. The call for a 6-hour workday, 6 weeks of vacation, and retirement at 55. Doesn't that reinforce the popular image of OWS as a heap of lazy bums? Why don't they add free dope for all and Nintendo for all, too? How's that? Can you imagine this? Can you imagine? Who are these people? Who are these people? These demands are no different than the demands of the Bolsheviks during the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 in Russia. These tactics have been tried through and through over the past 100 years in Europe, North America, South America, Australia, and Africa. Don't you understand what's going on here? Nobody born after 1980 can honestly remember communist Russia, and that's because the socialist machine that operates our National Educational Association and other elements of the government promotes socialism's lie that Russia was a classless society, when in fact there actually were two classes which existed in the former Soviet Union. There were Communist Party members who had, and the proletariat who had nothing, very much like what's happening in America today. These very same tactics were tried during the early 20th century. Most of you don't know this because your schools have not taught this to you. Research Seattle in the early 1900s. Research Boston in the early 1900s. Research what happened when all the soldiers returned home from World War I and the unemployment rate skyrocketed. This is not about the rich screwing the little guy. This is about the law of supply and demand. When there is more demand, the cost of the limited supply will go up. And when the supply is much higher than there is demand, the cost goes down. Only private businesses create jobs. Government creates nothing. Nothing whatsoever. So let's do the math. If you want to do the minimum wage, redo the minimum wage to $18 an hour, let's analyze what that would be. So let's say that a loaf of bread normally costs 15 cents per loaf to make, based on today's economy, based on $10 per hour wage. Baking 1,000 loaves of bread would then cost $150 in labor costs alone. 1,000 loaves of bread may take 4 hours to complete from start to finish. If it takes 5 laborers in the production of 1,000 loaves of bread from start to finish, then at the proposed minimum wage increase to $18 an hour by the vermin in the gutters of Wall Street, baking 1,000 loaves of bread would then cost $360 in labor costs alone. 1,000 loaves of bread may take 4 hours to complete from start to finish. If it takes 5 laborers in the production of 1,000 loaves of bread from start to finish, those same 1,000 loaves of bread would now cost the manufacturing baker 36 cents per loaf to make. So the cost to produce each loaf would more than double. So you say, well, that's nothing. It's only 36 cents per loaf. Okay, that's not a big deal. Shall I go on? Well, keeping all things equal, let's say that all costs are equal and rise by the same 58%. The ingredients to produce those 1,000 loaves of bread go from 12 cents per loaf to 19 cents per loaf. 36 cents labor plus 19 cents for ingredients is now 55 cents per loaf. Marketing the bread in order to sell those loaves to retailers will go from 3 cents per loaf to 5 cents per loaf. Shipping those 1,000 loaves to the various distribution warehouses or directly to retailers will go from 8 cents a loaf of bread to 13 cents per loaf of bread. The manufacturing baker would mark up the product by 200% to cover possible unexpected costs. So the original total cost to produce 1,000 loaves of bread is now how much? How much is it now with the $18 an hour wage? It's now up to $1.46 cents per loaf. Now, at the retail level, the original cost of 76 cents per loaf to the retailer is now $1.46 per loaf. Now, the retailer has to make a profit to keep his lights on and pay his employees, right? So they pass their costs on to you, the buyer. So they'll mark the product up another 200% to cover its unexpected costs and make a small profit. So when the $10 an hour worker who makes $40 for 4 hours worth of work can take those 4 hours worth of wages and purchase 26 loaves of bread at the original market price of $1.52, right? But the $18 per hour worker who makes $72 for 4 hours worth of work can take those 4 hours worth of wages and purchase 24 loaves of bread at the increased market price of $2.92. So I'm showing you one thing. These socialist demands are a complete and total insanity and will do more harm to society and produce starvation than leaving people to compete and innovate so that true wealth and prosperity can be available for those of us who pursue it. By the way, all of the above does not include any taxes in the equation. And if you think the Soviet Union provided more food for more people, you don't know what went on in the Soviet Union. Do you remember the pictures of the empty butcher shops with one bologna hanging from the ceiling? Or people waiting online for 3 days to buy a loaf of bread? That's what will happen if you start to control wages and you start to control wages and profit. I'll be right back.